This tweet from this incredible investigative producer for HLN and the host of the Down the Hill podcast, which covers these Delphi murders. Her name is Barbara MacDonald, and she's in studio tonight. Great to see you, Barbara.
It's great to see you, too.
Give me the backstory on this letter. Like, where did you come across it? When you first read it, what did you think about it? And what does it mean?
It's some letter, isn't it? I mean, most people who are reading it are going, wow, we didn't expect this. I found out that there was a letter today. I called the court, got a copy of it, and it's a handwritten letter that he submitted while he was still in the White County Jail. He is now in protective custody, in state custody. But while he was still at the White County Jail, he wrote this letter and sent it to the court. And there's some really interesting stuff that he writes in the letter. You can see his handwriting here.
What about that handwriting? A lot of us were talking about that today.
Yeah, you know, it's, I guess he doesn't have many options in jail to use a typewriter or a computer to write the letter. But, you know, he's begging in this letter. He sounds desperate. A lot of people are making comment about his statement, as you did, that, you know, he didn't know it would be so expensive to hire an attorney. Well, yeah, it is expensive, especially when you're facing double murder allegations.
In the highest profile case ever to come out of that part of the state. I mean, let's be honest, this case was bigger than big. It went unsolved for so many years. And then this guy, Richard, you've been out there so many times.
Yes.
Did you ever go to the CVS? Just
all the time.
You did?
Pretty much every time I've been in town, I've shopped there. I've gone there to pick up medicine. I've gone there to pick up items I'd forgotten on my trip.
Because it's a small town, right?
It's a very small town. It's one of the few places to get stuff like that when you're in Delphi. And I've talked to family members of both girls who've shopped there regularly. The sheriff shopped there regularly.
Alan worked at CVS. You can actually see the store from the sheriff's office. Sheriff Lazenby remembers seeing Alan there and having interactions with him, describing Alan as professional.
To make the connection now, it's just it's a very unusual feeling.
Deputies shop there regularly. I mean, you know, it's basically the corner store if you're in Delphi.
Wow. And I mean, for the family, they were always thinking, like, the person responsible could be living among us.
And, you know,
and he was. If this is the guy, right?
If this is the guy, exactly. He is innocent until he's proven guilty. So at this point, he is considered innocent. But the family members have been looking for this person high and low. I mean, they tell me they sit in traffic and look at the drivers in the cars next to them. What is that like, walking around town looking at people?
Oh, that was terrible. It didn't matter where you went, you were looking. I made so many people feel uncomfortable.
We were at a stoplight one time,
and the person felt us staring so hard. And I just kept staring and staring. And he, you know, he's looking around and he notices I'm staring him down. And I felt so bad for him, but I couldn't stop.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem staring at somebody. I know it's rude. It's not something we're supposed to do in our world, but I have no problem staring at somebody. It's just part of it. It's just, I can't, you know, it's within me now. I gotta look.
You feel like you're staring down everybody, and then any weird feeling you get can just turn your whole day, but to nearly give yourself a panic attack.
To see, is that the person, you know? Is this who we're looking for? So they're all looking, the sheriff is looking, but they're still going into the CVS and shopping, and nobody is putting two and two together that this could be the guy.
It's unreal. And there's a picture of the CVS. So something we heard in the letter was that his wife had to move out of their house. And we've seen video of his house. Like, are the people in Delphi out there with, like, pitchforks and stuff, or are they exaggerating a little bit here?
I think it's probably more the media attention, and
Oh, they don't like us?
Well, you know, it's a lot of attention on what used to be a very quiet street. And, you know, the neighbors have told me that they see cars driving by all the time. Neighbors have put out ropes blocking off their driveways and their grass so that people don't park there. When the news first broke last week that he was under arrest, yeah, everybody was out there trying to get video. People have been trying to walk around the property, and, you know, I'm sure for a woman living alone, that probably is a pretty intimidating situation with so many people suddenly interested in you
and probably
your
a lot of
house.
them from outside of town as well, right? It's not just your local
Well,
Delphi neighbors.
Probably a lot of podcasters and YouTubers as
Yeah.
well, you know, trying to get a story. Yeah.
So, what was your reaction? I mean, you've covered this story for so many years. What was your reaction when this man was arrested?
I think like everyone else, who? Who's this guy? Where did he come from? How long has he been on the radar? He's not somebody that I have seen talk of. He's not somebody that my sources knew about or talked about. So he definitely seemed to sort of come out of left field. My understanding is he hasn't really been on their radar as a suspect for very long at all. And hopefully we're going to know soon as he starts making some court appearances what evidence they have against him and why they believe he's the guy.
And why now? Like, what happened now? Because the other thing that was happening out there was this guy, Kagan Klein, right?
Yes.
The guy who was accused of child pornography and who was apparently had a social media site where he used a fake picture of a male model to entice little girls, right? But he was interacting with Libby and Abby
to some degree, and we don't know exactly what that interaction is. I do know that Libby's sister, Kelsi, did get in touch with that fake profile while the girls were missing and inquired. She was working with a friend, and they reached out through the friend's profile and said, hey, you know, do you know anything? And the response from whoever was using the profile at that time was, oh, I'm sure she'll turn up. I was supposed to meet her, but, you know, she didn't show. So the police have all that information. They have all that text messages. They have Kagan's phone. So if there is that evidence, hopefully we'll find out what that link is.
Riding through the city with this pain on me. Pray I make it home, cause my tank on me. I know you catch your feelings, but it just ain't me. Didn't mean to break it hard, but the blame on me. Riding through the city with this pain on me. Pray I make it home, cause my tank on me. I know you catch your feelings, but it just ain't me. Didn't mean to break it hard, but the blame on me. Snapchat story and catastrophe. But don't swear with your jealousy. I know you catch your feelings, but it just ain't me. Didn't mean to break it hard, but the blame on me. Everything I post, you reply to. Yeah, nobody likes to be lied to. No, why do I even stand beside you? Every time I try to switch you right to.
Newer stuff with the, Kagan Klein. I mean, what was that like when it came out? Maybe you could just go through the whole situation if you can. I mean, whatever part you can talk about regarding the, out of nowhere, one day you hear about Anthony Schatz, but you did communicate with the Anthony Schatz account, according to documents now, like the same day she was missing, right?
I did. I spoke to him on Libby's social media.
Just texting now, right?
Just texting. And the conversation wasn't anything that sounded suspicious. It didn't bring anything back to me. So the conversation was short. We barely talked. And then when law enforcement said there's no social media, it just was pushed to the back of my mind, and I didn't think about it again until a few years later when the name was brought up to me again by law enforcement. And after that, I
but at the time, do you think maybe you mentioned it to law enforcement somewhere in maybe a conversation, or was it just something where it didn't alarm you after communicating? Because it seemed like law enforcement was aware of this account almost immediately, because they had to get a warrant, and then they were already over at Kagan Klein's house on the 23rd.
Well, I'm definitely going to say they probably knew about it because they had Libby's social media, and obviously he was on there. But from me, I didn't seem alarmed by it. Like, the conversation just wasn't
anything that I thought was to be worried about. So I was even less worried about it when law enforcement said there was no social media aspect.
Yeah, that's one of the sort of the, I mean, if you were going to get frustrated at one thing that they did, is like they for years told everybody that it wasn't, at least all the way up until 2000. No. They already said there was no social media. They've already looked at it all, right? So,
right, like they had looked into it as far as we knew, and that they didn't think there was any social media involvement. So we didn't think anything else of it, and we started looking down different avenues as a family, and all of a sudden, it was last year, right? Or was it this year?
It was like, I think it was December 2021.
2021. They come back and say, hey, like, we're releasing this account. And I was sitting in this seat when my grandma called me. Law enforcement called me first, and my grandpa wasn't answering his phone, actually. So he called me and said, hey, Kelsi, we need to talk to your grandpa. And I'm like, it's 7:30 at night. What do you need to talk to my grandpa about that you can't tell me? And I don't think they wanted to tell me. I think they knew how devastated I was going to be. And it's easier to tell my grandpa things, I guess, to tell me or my grandma. So they talked to my grandpa, and my grandma calls me back.
And I just remember feeling so angry. I was sitting here and I was like, I remember that name. I know I talked to that person.
Anthony Shots. Ever heard of him?
I wish.
Anthony Shots. Ever heard of him?
I wish. New information to us as of last night, before everybody else, but still new information. I'm kind of torn. I would never want to think that social media was a connection in this, but also I do hope that there's a connection now.
I remember that name. I know I talked to that person.
I wish.
That night, and I didn't tell anyone because I didn't think it was important.
But he was interacting with Libby and Abby
to some degree, and we don't know exactly what that interaction is. I do know that Libby's sister, Kelsi, did get in touch with that fake profile while the girls were missing and inquired. She was working with a friend, and they reached out through the friend's profile and said, hey, do you know anything? And the response from whoever was using the profile at that time was, oh, I'm sure she'll turn up. I was supposed to meet her, but, she didn't show. So the police have all that information. They have all that text messages. They have Kegan's phone. So if there is that evidence, hopefully we'll find out what that link is.
What does your gut tell you right now? Do you think more people could potentially be arrested here, connected to all of this?
I think there's definitely that possibility. We haven't heard the story around this guy. We were expecting that at the press conference, for them to say, this is the guy and this is why we believe he's the guy. We haven't gotten that yet. So he is charged with murder in Indiana, as I'm sure you're very well aware. That could still be as an accessory or accomplice. So, what exactly is he accused of? We don't know that yet.
We shall see. Barbara MacDonald.